10:30 a.m., Brad had circled back 3 more times. Marsh, those files aren't going to digitize themselves. He leaned against the partition of Toby's cubicle, arms crossed, projecting his voice just loud enough for the surrounding desks to hear. At this rate, you'll finish sometime next year. Oh wait, your contract expires in 2 months. Guess we'll have to find someone competent to clean up your mess. Toby's fingers continued their steady rhythm across the keyboard. Click. Scroll. Type. He didn't look up. Are you even listening to me? Brad snapped. I am, Toby said quietly. You said the files won't digitize themselves. It's called urgency, Marsh. Maybe you've heard of it. It's what separates the people who build careers from the people who. Brad gestured vaguely at Toby's entire existence, fill space. From 2 cubicles over, Jessica, one of the junior project managers, shot Toby a sympathetic look. She'd been on the receiving end of Brad's tirades often enough to recognize the pattern. But like everyone else, she said nothing. In Brad's territory, silence was survival. And another thing, Brad continued, warming to his theme. Did you seriously wear those pants to a professional office? What is that, some kind of discount store special? We have clients walking through here, Marsh. $1 billion clients. You think they want to see their investment firm staffed by someone who looks like he's about to mow a lawn? Toby finally glanced down at his khakis. They were wrinkled from the wash, a bit too loose, paired with brown shoes that had seen better years. He looked back at his screen. I'll keep that in mind, he said. I'll keep that in mind, Brad echoed with exaggerated patience. You know what your problem is? No ambition. No drive. You probably think showing up and doing the bare minimum is enough. Well, let me tell you something, in this world, the real world, mediocre people get left behind. And you, Marsh? You're the definition of mediocre. Brad's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, then straightened his tie, a silk number that probably cost more than Toby's entire outfit. I've got a leadership meeting. Try not to embarrass the company while I'm gone. He paused at the cubicle entrance, a thought occurring to him. Actually, you know what? When I get back, I want a full status report on your progress. Let's see if you can actually meet a deadline for once. He strode away, already barking orders at someone else. Toby saved his work, leaned back in his creaking chair, and allowed himself the smallest of smiles. In his email inbox, buried under 100 mundane messages, was a single line from an encrypted address, Observer Protocol, Final Phase Initiates 1,400 hours. 2:30 this afternoon. That's when Brad Sterling would learn exactly how much a mediocre man could accomplish. The break room at 11:45 was always crowded, prime real estate for the lunch rush. Toby arrived with his brown paper bag and thermos, the same ones he brought every day, and claimed his usual spot at the corner table by the window. The table nobody else wanted because it was too small, too isolated, too far from the conversation. Perfect. He unwrapped his sandwich, turkey and Swiss on wheat, made that morning, and opened a battered paperback. To anyone watching, he was invisible. Part of the furniture. I swear to God, he's going to get fired before his contract's even up. The voice belonged to Marcus from business development, speaking just loud enough to carry across the room. He was huddled with 2 other associates near the coffee station, their voices pitched in that careless register of people who assume they can't be overheard. Brad's been documenting everything, added Simone, the tall woman with the designer glasses. Every late arrival, every missed deadline. He's building a case. Does Marsh even have missed deadlines? That was Chen, the newest hire, still idealistic enough to ask questions. I thought temps just did whatever we told them to do. Marcus snorted. The guy takes 20 minutes to file a single document. 20 minutes. I timed him once. It's like watching paint dry in slow motion. Maybe he's just careful. Chen offered weakly. Or maybe he's just useless, Simone said, stirring her latte. Look, I feel bad for the guy, but this is sterling and cross. We're not a charity. If you can't keep up, you don't belong here. Toby turned a page in his book, chewing slowly. His expression never changed. I heard Brad called him mediocre this morning, Marcus continued. Right to his face. In front of everyone. Harsh, Chen muttered. Accurate, Simone corrected. You know what the saddest part is? The man's got to be, 50? And he's still temping. No career, no prospects, just drifting from one contract to the next. It's depressing. Do you think he has family? Chen asked. Like, people who depend on him? God, I hope not, Marcus said. Can you imagine? Sorry kids, Dad's still making $15 an hour at 50 whatever because he never bothered to develop actual skills. They laughed, not cruelly, exactly, but with the casual dismissiveness of people who'd never questioned their own trajectory. People who assumed the world was a meritocracy, and anyone at the bottom had simply failed to climb. Toby closed his book and took a sip from his thermos. Earl Grey tea, steeped for exactly 4 minutes. He'd been drinking it for 30 years, ever since a young CEO named Alastair Thorne had served it to him during their first meeting. Back when Thorne was just a terrified MBA graduate who'd inherited a dying firm and didn't know how to save it. Back when Toby Marsh had taught him everything. His phone vibrated. A text from an unlisted number, boardroom breach detected. Confidence critical. Recommend acceleration. Toby deleted the message and returned to his sandwich. Not yet. Let them talk. Let them believe their own story. The truth would arrive soon enough. The alarm went off at 1:47 p.m. Not a fire alarm, something worse. The kind of alarm that only registered on the screens of senior management, flashing red across every monitor on the executive floor. Within seconds, Brad Sterling burst from the conference room, his face drained of color. Who approved the Meridian contract amendments? His voice cracked across the office like a whip. Who signed off on those changes? The floor fell silent. Keyboards stopped clicking. Phone conversations died mid-sentence. Toby looked up from his data entry, watching as Brad stalked toward the operations cluster where 3 analysts sat frozen at their desks. It was the standard protocol, stammered Kevin, the senior analyst. You told us to expedite the Meridian deal, so we pushed through the modifications they requested. Those weren't modifications. Brad roared. Those were liability transfers. Do you understand what you've just done? You've exposed Sterling and Cross to a $200 million risk window. The board is going to crucify us. But you said, Jessica started. I don't care what I said. You're supposed to have judgment. You're supposed to know when to push back. Brad's hands were shaking. Get me the original contract. Now. And somebody call legal. Tell them we need damage control immediately. The office erupted into controlled chaos. People scrambled for files, jabbed at phones, huddled in urgent whispers. Brad paced like a caged animal, barking orders that contradicted each other, his carefully constructed authority unraveling with every passing second. Toby saved his work and stood quietly. He walked to the printer bay, ostensibly to collect something, but positioned himself where he could see Brad's computer screen. The Meridian contract was pulled up, red annotations screaming across the document. The problem was obvious. Clause 7(b) had been modified to shift intellectual property rights without corresponding indemnification language. It was a rookie mistake, the kind that happened when someone prioritized speed over comprehension. When someone was more concerned with looking decisive than being right. Brad had approved it himself 3 days ago. Toby had watched him do it, watched him wave away Jessica's cautious questions with an impatient, "Just process it. I don't have time for your paranoia." Now that paranoia looked prophetic. "This is unfixable." Brad was shouting into his phone. "No, I understand the optics, but, yes, sir. Yes, I'll prepare a full report. We'll have recommendations by end of day." He hung up and slumped into his chair, the fight draining out of him. For just a moment, he looked less like a tyrant and more like what he actually was, a man promoted beyond his competence, desperately trying to maintain an illusion of control. Around him, the staff worked frantically, trying to contain the damage. Trying to fix what Brad's arrogance had broken. Toby returned to his desk and opened his bottom drawer. Inside was a folder he'd prepared 2 weeks ago. A complete analysis of the Meridian contract, including the exact problem that had just detonated, along with 3 potential solutions. He closed the drawer. Not yet. At 3:15 p.m., Brad left for an emergency call with the board. The moment the elevator doors closed behind him, Toby moved. He didn't rush, that would draw attention. He simply stood, collected a blank folder for camouflage, and walked to the operations hub where Jessica sat staring at her screen with the hollow-eyed exhaustion of someone watching their career implode. "The Meridian file," Toby said quietly. "May I see it?" Jessica looked up, startled. "Toby, this is way above your clearance level. I could get in serious trouble." "I understand. But I might be able to help." Something in his tone made her hesitate. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the calm certainty in his voice, so different from Brad's manic energy. She glanced around the office, then pulled up the file and angled her screen slightly toward him. "You have 5 minutes before Brad gets back," she whispered. Toby leaned in, his eyes scanning the document with the speed of someone who'd written 1,000 contracts just like it. His fingers didn't touch the keyboard, but his mind was already 3 steps ahead, parsing the clauses, identifying the pressure points. "The IP transfer in Clause 7(b), he said. "It needs a reciprocal indemnification clause anchored to subsection 12. Add language that mirrors their liability window to ours. They wanted the rights, make them assume proportional risk." "That's actually brilliant," Jessica breathed. "But how do we?" "There's a precedent. The Holloway merger from 2019. Similar structure. Pull that contract template and adapt the language." Jessica's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Oh my God. You're right. This could work. This could actually. What the hell is going on here?" Brad's voice cut through the office like a chainsaw. He was back early, his face flushed, his tie loosened. He must have taken the call in the lobby. Behind him, several colleagues froze mid-conversation. "Marsh." Brad crossed the floor in 4 angry strides. "Step away from that computer. Now." Toby straightened but didn't move away. You were just interfering with confidential client work." Brad's voice rose to a shout. "Do you have any idea how many protocols you just violated? This is a senior-level crisis, and you're what, a temp doing data entry, and you think you can just waltz over and start giving advice?" "He was actually helping," Jessica started. "I don't care." Brad whirled on her. "You let unauthorized personnel access restricted files. That's a terminable offense." He turned back to Toby, his finger jabbing the air. "And you, this is insubordination. This is a direct violation of your contract. You don't touch client work. You don't offer opinions. You don't even think about matters above your pay grade." The office had gone completely silent. 30 people watching. Phones recording. Futures being decided in real time. Toby met Brad's eyes with that same maddening calm. "I was trying to help fix the problem." "You're the problem, Marsh." Brad's voice dropped to something cold and final. Clear out your desk. You're done here. Brad didn't wait for a response. He snapped his fingers at one of the junior associates. Get me a box. Now. The young man scurried to the supply closet and returned with a standard cardboard file box, the kind everyone recognized. The walk of shame box. The you're fired box. Brad thrust it at Toby's chest. You have 10 minutes to pack your personal items. And I'll be watching to make sure you don't take anything that belongs to this company. Toby accepted the box without a word and walked back to his corner desk. Behind him, he could hear the whispers starting, phones being subtly angled to capture the moment. This was the kind of office drama that would fuel break room conversations for weeks. He opened his desk drawers methodically. A coffee mug with a faded logo from some corporate event. The battered paperback he'd been reading. His thermos. A framed photograph. Nothing special, just a landscape he'd picked up at a thrift store to make the desk feel less institutional. A handful of pens. That was it. 3 months at Sterling and Cross, and his entire presence fit in 8 inches of cardboard. Is that seriously all you have? Brad had followed him, arms crossed, playing to his audience. 3 months here and that's your legacy? A chipped mug and a book. Toby placed the photograph carefully in the box. You know what's sad, Marsh? Brad's voice carried across the silent office. You're 50 years old, and this is your life. Temp jobs. Cheap clothes. A box of garbage that wouldn't sell for $5 at a yard sale. He laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. My nephew is 23 and has more career prospects than you've accumulated in your entire existence. Few people looked away. Chen, the idealistic new hire, stared at his shoes. Jessica's jaw was clenched tight. No family photos, Brad continued, peering into the box. No awards, no certifications, no evidence that anyone, anywhere, has ever valued your contribution to anything. Do you know what that tells me? It tells me this isn't some tragic misunderstanding. This is just who you are. A nobody who never became a somebody. Toby closed the box flaps and tucked them in. He picked it up, tested the weight. Light. Manageable. Security will escort you out, Brad announced. Company policy. Can't have fired employees wandering around unsupervised. Who knows what kind of damage a disgruntled temp might cause. He smirked at his own joke. 2 security guards appeared, Mike and Dennis, guys Toby had exchanged pleasant nods with for months. They looked uncomfortable but professional. This way, sir, Mike said quietly, gesturing toward the elevator. Toby nodded and began the long walk across the office floor. Past the cubicles. Past the break room where people had mocked his incompetence just hours ago. Past the conference rooms where deals worth millions were struck by people who'd never know his name. Brad called after him, good luck finding your next gig, Marsh. Maybe try fast food. They're always hiring. The elevator doors opened. Toby stepped inside, still holding his pathetic box. The doors began to close. And through the glass walls of the lobby, a black motorcade pulled into the circular drive. Elevator descended in silence. Mike and Dennis flanked Toby, their eyes fixed on the digital floor numbers ticking down. Neither spoke. It was the kind of silence that acknowledged shame without claiming it. When the doors opened to the lobby, Jessica was there, breathless. She must have taken the stairs. Toby, wait, she stopped when she saw the guards, then pressed forward anyway. I wanted to say I'm sorry. You were right about the Meridian fix. I ran it past legal after you left, and they said it was exactly what we needed. You saved the account. Toby shifted the box to one hip. I'm glad it helped. It's not fair, Jessica said, her voice dropping. Brad's the one who approved the bad contract in the first place. You were just trying to clean up his mess, and now," she gestured helplessly at the box, the guards, the whole humiliating tableau. "These things happen," Toby said simply. "But they shouldn't." Jessica glanced at the guards, then back at Toby. "Listen, I know some people at other firms. Good people. I can make some calls, put in a word. You deserve better than this." For the first time all day, Toby's expression softened. "That's kind of you, Jessica. Really. But I'll be fine. How can you be so calm?" She shook her head, bewildered. "If Brad had just fired me like that, publicly humiliated me, I'd be, I don't even know. Furious. Destroyed." Toby set the box down on the security desk for a moment, just long enough to pull out a business card holder, worn leather, nearly empty. He extracted a single card and handed it to her. "If you ever want to talk about organizational philosophy," he said, "about building companies that value people over protocol, give me a call. I think you'd be good at it." Jessica took the card, frowning at it in the lobby's bright light. It was simple, almost austere. Just a name and a phone number. No title, no company affiliation. But the name made her freeze. "T. Marsh," she read aloud. Then, quieter, "Tobias Marsh." She looked up sharply. Wait. The Tobias Marsh? The one who wrote Foundations of Ethical Leadership? The consultant who, her eyes went wide. Oh my God. "We should keep moving," Mike said gently, though his own expression had shifted to something unreadable. Toby picked up his box again. "Take care of yourself, Jessica. And remember, the people at the bottom often see the truth more clearly than the ones at the top. Don't forget that when you're climbing." He walked toward the glass doors, the guards following at a respectful distance now, their body language subtly changed. Behind him, Jessica stood frozen in the lobby, staring at the card in her hand like it was an archaeological artifact. Outside, the black motorcade had multiplied. 3 vehicles now, parked in formation. Men in dark suits speaking into earpieces. A sense of barely controlled urgency. And then the center car's door opened. Alistair Thorne emerged from the vehicle like a storm-given human form. He was in his early 60s, silver-haired and sharp-featured, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars. But it was his expression that stopped everyone cold, raw, undisguised panic. The kind of fear that CEOs spent their entire careers learning to hide. He didn't wait for his security detail. He didn't acknowledge the driver holding the door. He simply strode toward the building's entrance with the single-minded intensity of a man whose world was ending. Brad had seen the motorcade from the windows upstairs. He'd sprinted down 4 flights rather than wait for the elevator, his mind already calculating. The CEO never visited the satellite office. Never. Which meant this was either an extraordinary opportunity or a career-ending disaster, and Brad needed to control the narrative before. "Mr. Thorne." Brad burst through the lobby doors, his voice pitched perfectly between deference and executive confidence. "Sir, what an unexpected honor. If you'd given us advance notice, we would have prepared a proper." Thorne walked past him as if he were invisible. "Mr. Thorne." Brad followed, confusion cracking through his polish. "Sir, I'm Brad Sterling, Senior Operations Manager. I oversee this facility. If there's been some kind of concern, I assure you we can address it in the executive conference room. I've just handled a major crisis with the Meridian account." Thorne stopped so abruptly that Brad nearly collided with him. The CEO's eyes swept the lobby, across the security desk, past Jessica still standing frozen with her business card, toward the glass doors leading to the parking lot. "Where is he?" Thorne's voice was hoarse, desperate. "Where is Tobias Marsh?" Brad blinked. I'm sorry, who?" "Marsh. Thorne shouted, his composure shattering completely. Toby Marsh. I was told he's been stationed here for 3 months. Where is he? Oh. Brad's expression shifted to something between confusion and disdain. The temp? Sir, I just terminated his contract. He was interfering with confidential client work, violating multiple protocols. The color drained from Thorne's face. You did what? I fired him, Brad said, his confidence returning slightly. He'd made the right call, clearly. Even the CEO recognized the man was a problem. He was insubordinate, unprofessional, completely unsuited for. You fired him? Thorne's voice rose to a roar that echoed through the marble lobby. You fired Tobias Marsh? Do you have any idea what you've just done? Brad opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Around them, the lobby had filled with staff drawn by the commotion. Phones were out. Cameras recording. Thorne grabbed Brad's shoulder, spinning him toward the glass doors. Which way did he go? Which way? Through the window, they could see a figure in wrinkled khakis walking across the parking lot, carrying a cardboard box. Thorne ran. Toby had made it halfway across the parking lot when he heard the footsteps. Fast. Urgent. Growing closer. He stopped and turned, still holding his box, as Alistair Thorne sprinted across the asphalt like a man chasing the last helicopter out of a war zone. Behind him, the entire office had pressed against the glass walls, a human aquarium of shocked faces. Toby. Thorne skidded to a halt 3 feet away, chest heaving. Toby, please. Please tell me you haven't. Hello, Alistair, Toby said calmly. You're early. I wasn't expecting you until next week. I got the alert. Thorne's hands were shaking. The protocol breach. The Meridian crisis. And then I heard, he couldn't finish the sentence. His eyes dropped to the cardboard box. They fired you. Technically, my contract was terminated for insubordination. No. Thorne shook his head violently. No, no, no. This wasn't supposed to happen. You were just supposed to observe, to assess, to help me understand if the company culture was. He pressed his palms against his temples. I failed you. I failed the entire mission. I'm so sorry. Toby set the box down gently on the hood of a nearby car. You didn't fail anything. Did. Thorne's voice cracked. I put you in there, told you to blend in, to experience the company from the bottom, and I didn't protect you. I should have been more explicit with Sterling. I should have created safeguards. Instead, I let them treat you like a temp who moved too slowly and wore cheap clothes. Toby's eyes held a hint of amusement. Alistair, that was the point. The point wasn't humiliation. Thorne shot back. The point wasn't having some arrogant middle manager mock everything you've built, everything you've taught. And then, in front of 30 witnesses pressed against the glass, in full view of the security cameras and the phones recording every second, Alistair Thorne, CEO of Sterling and Cross International, a man who advised governments and sat on boards that controlled billions, dropped to one knee. I'm sorry, sir, he said, his voice thick. I'm so deeply sorry. The silence that followed was absolute. Inside the building, Brad Sterling stood frozen at the entrance, his hand still on the door handle. His face had gone the color of old paper. Toby looked down at the kneeling CEO, then sighed, a long, weary exhale that seemed to carry 3 months of accumulated observation. Get up, Alistair, he said quietly. You're making a scene. I don't care. But Thorne rose anyway, his knees creaking slightly. What do you need? New contract. Formal apology. I'll fire Sterling myself, right now, in front of everyone. No, Toby said. We're going to do this properly. Which means I'm going back inside. He picked up his box. And you're coming with me. The walk back to the building felt like a funeral procession in reverse, life returning to a corpse. Thorne walked slightly behind Toby, a positioning that everyone noticed. The CEO of Sterling and Cross, deferring to a man carrying a cardboard box. The crowd parted as they entered the lobby, bodies pressed against walls, breath held. Brad Sterling stood near the security desk, his face cycling through emotions too quickly to name. Confusion. Fear. Denial. The beginning of understanding. Conference room, Thorne said, his voice steady now but edged with steel. Everyone. Now. Sir, I can explain, Brad started. Conference room. Now. They filed in like students called to the principal's office. Brad, Jessica, Marcus, Simone, Chen, Kevin, all the major players, plus a dozen others who'd watched the drama unfold. Mike and Dennis, the security guards, stood awkwardly by the door until Thorne waved them in too. Close the door, Thorne ordered. Someone did. Toby set his box on the conference table, that pathetic collection of a mug, a book, a thermos, and remained standing. Thorne stood beside him, and the symbolism was impossible to miss. They were side by side. Equals. Or perhaps something more complicated than that. How many of you know who Tobias Marsh is? Thorne asked the room. Jessica's hand rose shakily. I just found out. Anyone else? Silence. Blank faces. The name meant nothing to them. Thorne's jaw tightened. Tobias Marsh wrote the foundational text on ethical leadership that's taught in every business school worth attending. He's consulted for 43 Fortune 500 companies. He's the man who rebuilt 3 failing corporations from the ground up, including, he paused for emphasis, Sterling and Cross. The air went out of the room. 28 years ago, my uncle was running this company into the ground. Toxic culture, predatory practices, employee turnover at 80%. We were 6 months from bankruptcy. And then Toby walked in, not as a consultant, not as an executive, but as a floor worker. He spent a year working alongside our lowest paid employees, understanding the systems from the inside out. Everything he learned became the blueprint for our transformation. Brad's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Every training program you've attended, Thorne continued, his voice rising. Every leadership principle in our corporate handbook. Every value statement on our walls. Toby wrote them. Toby built them. This company exists because of his vision. He turned to face Brad directly. And 3 months ago, I asked him to come back. To do it again. Because I'd heard rumors that Sterling and Cross was losing its soul. That managers were more concerned with ego than excellence. That we'd become the very thing Toby had saved us from. Thorne's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. I asked him to observe. To document. To show me the truth. Brad was shaking his head slowly, desperately. No. No, that's not, he was just a temp. He moved slowly, he dressed like someone you could dismiss, Toby said softly. Yes. That was rather the point. Brad's face had gone from pale to flushed, sweat beading at his temples. Sir, if I had known, if anyone had told me. Told you what? Toby asked, his voice still maddeningly calm. That you should treat people with respect. That competence isn't measured by the speed of someone's walk or the cost of their clothes. That's not fair. Brad's voice cracked. You deliberately deceived us. You came in here pretending to be a temp, Toby finished. Yes. Someone at the bottom of your hierarchy. Someone you believed had no power, no value, no right to your consideration. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, worn, filled with neat handwriting. May I? He didn't wait for an answer. He opened to a bookmarked page. October 8th. You told Jennifer from reception that her concerns about the new scheduling software were admin-level problems that didn't warrant management attention. The software was glitching, causing people to miss breaks. She worked through lunch for 2 weeks straight before quitting. Brad's mouth worked soundlessly. October 22nd. You rejected Marcus's proposal for flexible work arrangements for parents, calling it lifestyle accommodation that would set a bad precedent. 3 talented analysts left within the month. All parents. November 3rd. You told Kevin his analysis was too detailed and that you didn't have time to read his novel. That analysis predicted the exact Meridian contract issue that detonated today. You dismissed it without reading past the first page. Toby turned a page. November 19th. You called me mediocre. You said I was the definition of mediocre. In front of 30 witnesses. The room was silent except for someone's ragged breathing, Brad's, probably. I could go on, Toby said. I have 73 pages of observations. Patterns of behavior. Moments where ego overruled judgment. Where status mattered more than substance. He closed the notebook. But I think you understand the problem now. I was just, Brad's voice was barely a whisper. I was just trying to maintain standards. To push for excellence. That's what leadership. Leadership, Thorne cut in, his voice like a knife, is what Toby demonstrated today when he tried to fix your mistake. When he saw a crisis and moved to solve it, despite knowing you'd punish him for it. That's leadership, Sterling. What you've been doing is tyranny dressed up in expensive suits. Brad looked around the room, searching for allies, for someone who might defend him. But Jessica was staring at her hands. Marcus wouldn't meet his eyes. Chen looked like he might be sick. Every insult you threw at him, Thorne continued, every dismissive comment, every moment you treated him like garbage, you were showing us exactly who you are when you think no one important is watching. So what happens now? Brad's voice had lost all its polish, all its confidence. It was the voice of a man watching his world end. Toby looked at Thorne, then back at Brad. Now, he said quietly, we talk about what leadership actually means. Toby moved to the head of the conference table, his wrinkled khakis and discount shirt suddenly irrelevant. The man wearing them had changed, or perhaps the room's perception had finally caught up to reality. I want to be clear about something, he began, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made Brad's earlier shouting seem like a child's tantrum. This wasn't an experiment designed to humiliate anyone. It was designed to reveal the truth. And the truth is complicated. He looked around the room, meeting eyes one by one. Some of you failed. You participated in mockery. You made assumptions about worth based on appearance and position. That's human, and it's fixable, but it needs to be acknowledged. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Simone looked at the table. But some of you didn't fail, Toby continued. Jessica, you questioned the Meridian contract even when it was dismissed. You showed judgment under pressure. And when I was being escorted out, you risked your standing to apologize. That took courage. Jessica's eyes were wet. Chen, you asked if I had family who depended on me. In a conversation where everyone else was comfortable with casual cruelty, you chose empathy. That matters. The young analyst looked stunned. Mike and Dennis, Toby nodded to the security guards. You treated me with quiet dignity every single day. A nod in the morning. Have a good evening when I left. You saw a person, not a position. Kevin, you tried to show Brad your analysis 3 times before giving up. You did the work. You saw the problem. The failure wasn't yours. Toby pulled a sheet of paper from his box, somehow it had been there all along, prepared and waiting. Effective immediately, I'm recommending the following changes. He read from the paper. Jessica Chen, promotion to Senior Operations Analyst with direct report to Executive Leadership. Marcus Chen, no relation. Promotion to Junior Project Manager with Mentorship Track. Kevin Ostroff, transfer to Strategic Risk Assessment with corresponding salary adjustment. Mike Torres and Dennis Chen, he paused. Yes, 3 Chens in one office. We should probably look into that. A few nervous laughs. Both promoted to senior security with expanded roles in organizational culture monitoring. You'll report directly to HR and will have authority to flag management behavior concerns. He set the paper down. These aren't rewards for being nice to me, Toby clarified. These are recognitions of competence that was being overlooked because the people demonstrating it didn't fit someone's narrow definition of leadership material. His eyes found Brad, who sat slumped in his chair, hollowed out. As for you, Mr. Sterling, your contract is terminated, effective today. You'll receive the standard severance package, and I'll personally write you a recommendation letter that focuses on your technical capabilities. But your time making decisions about other people's worth is over. Brad didn't protest. He just nodded slowly, a man already gone. Toby turned back to the others. Now, let's talk about how we rebuild. The meeting lasted another 2 hours. Toby walked them through the 73 pages, not as accusations, but as case studies. Moments where the culture had fractured. Opportunities where kindness could have changed outcomes. Systems that prioritized appearance over substance. By the end, half the room was taking notes. The other half was quietly crying. When it was over, people lingered. They wanted to apologize, to explain, to somehow rewrite the last 3 months. Toby accepted their words with grace but didn't absolve them. Forgiveness, he suggested, would come from how they treated the next person who didn't fit their expectations. Brad left without a word, escorted by HR. No one watched him go. He'd already become a ghost. As the sun set and the office emptied, Toby found himself back at his corner desk one final time. Jessica approached, still holding his business card like a talisman. "You're not staying, are you?" she asked. "No," Toby said simply. "This was never meant to be permanent. But we need you. We need someone who sees things the way you do." "You don't need me," Toby corrected gently. "You need to become people who see things this way. That's the difference between a consultant and a culture. Consultants leave. Culture stays." He picked up his box, still just a mug, a book, a thermos, and a photograph. 3 months distilled into 8 inches of cardboard. "What will you do now?" Jessica asked. "There's a manufacturing firm in Ohio. They're struggling with retention. After that, maybe a tech startup in Austin that's growing too fast to maintain its values." He smiled slightly. "There's always another company that needs someone to walk slowly through their hallways and pay attention." "The lonely work," she said. "The necessary work," he replied. Thorne was waiting in the lobby, hands in his pockets, looking a decade older than he had that morning. "I owe you an apology too," the CEO said. "I should have checked in more. Should have made sure you weren't." "Alistair," Toby interrupted. "Stop. You gave me exactly what I asked for, invisibility and autonomy. The rest was up to me." "What did you find?" Thorne asked quietly. "At the core of it, is Sterling and Cross savable?" Toby considered the question, looking back through the glass walls at the office where people were still gathered in small groups, processing, discussing, maybe beginning to change. "Jessica will be excellent," he said. "Chen has the empathy you need. Kevin has the analytical mind. Mike and Dennis understand that power comes with responsibility." He paused. "Brad wasn't your only problem, but he was symptomatic. The culture rewarded his behavior. That's what needs to change. And if it doesn't? Then in 5 years you'll call me again, Toby said. And I'll come back as a janitor or a receptionist, and we'll do this all over again. Thorne laughed, a broken, grateful sound. I hope that's not necessary. So do I. They shook hands, not as CEO and consultant, but as old friends who'd fought this battle before and would likely fight it again. Toby walked out into the parking lot, carrying his box. Behind him, through the glass, he could see Jessica addressing a small group. Pointing at something in her notes. Leading. He smiled. The work would continue. Just not with him. He set the box in his car, a modest sedan, paid off years ago, and drove away from Sterling and Cross for the last time. Somewhere in Ohio, a factory manager was making decisions that would bring Toby back to a loading dock, wearing steel-toed boots and a high-visibility vest. Somewhere in Austin, a startup founder was ignoring the quiet warnings of their customer service team. The work was never finished. But then again, that's what made it worth doing. Toby merged onto the highway as the sun set behind him, painting the sky in shades of ending and beginning. And in his rearview mirror, Sterling and Cross grew smaller. Not gone. Just waiting to see if the lesson would stick.